All right, buckle up, because what came out of Minnesota has the entire country talking. A billion-dollar welfare fraud scandal, millions allegedly funneled overseas, and somehow Ilhan Omar is pointing fingers at everyone except the people who actually stole the money. Let's play the video.
All right, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar responding to her state's massive welfare fraud scandal, pinning the blame not on the criminals, but those working to protect the American people.
If there was a linkage in the money that they had stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them.
Host of My View, Laura Trump, joins us now. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. So what do you think about that explanation there? Ilhan Omar saying that if taxpayer money did in fact go to the al-Shabaab terrorist organization, it would be a failing on the part of the FBI for not figuring it out.
Yeah, she sounded super confident in that answer, didn't she, Carly? She could not figure out how she was going to convince people that that was the case, but she said it anyway. It's ridiculous. Of course, the only failure here is from the people who are in leadership positions in Minnesota who allowed this fraud scheme to happen. And I'm looking at Ilhan Omar and I'm looking at Tim Walz, and they really are in the crosshairs of this whole thing. And a lot of people are wondering how it is humanly possible that this was allowed to happen. And this thing is huge. You talk to the White House and they have said, look, this is probably so much bigger and far reaching than just Minnesota. We know $1 billion was stolen from the taxpayers there in Minnesota. The White House says it actually is probably just scratching the surface. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And, you have the Treasury saying we do have connections through millions of dollars that they think was sent to Somalia, and that ultimately did end up in the hands of terrorists, as al-Shabaab terrorists. And so I think that's, of course, a ridiculous answer, but you're going to hear a lot more of that from Ilhan Omar, from Tim Walz. They're going to do a lot of jazz hands and trying to convince people to look the other way, because they are, again, the ones that everyone is looking at and saying, how is it that you were either so grossly incompetent or maybe willfully incompetent that you allowed this to happen in the state of Minnesota? Minnesota deserves better. The American people deserve better. And you know what? The only way they're going to clear their names is by asking for a full-throated, deep investigation and holding those responsible accountable for this.
Yeah, Laura, this is a pretty brazen time to be going on offense against the Trump administration after such a ridiculous fraud. Stephen Miller said that this is one of, if not the biggest frauds in American history, a waste of taxpayer money. And Omar is going back at Stephen Miller. Listen to what she had to say.
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, yes, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany.
So a reminder for our viewers, Stephen Miller is Jewish. Laura, your response to those comments?
Yeah, Nate, this is the knee-jerk reaction we know of anybody on the left to try to call people, conservatives and people, especially in the Trump administration, Nazis. Of course, as you pointed out, Stephen Miller is Jewish. That is absolutely insane. But this is what you say whenever you have no response. This is what you say to deflect from your failure as a congresswoman from this area in Minnesota. That should surprise absolutely nobody. What we're trying to see happen now as a country is transparency brought everywhere. That's what this administration, this president is about. We want to know at the end of the day who failed the people of Minnesota here. And I can guarantee you, the FBI we have now is much different than the FBI under Joe Biden. They will look into this. They will investigate. They will find out exactly what happened. And I think Ilhan Omar is probably going to be doing a lot of tap dancing in the foreseeable future, because I don't think she's got a lot of good explanations for how $1 billion from her state just, went missing from the taxpayer funding.
Well, Governor Tim Walz is also up for re-election, so we will have to wait and see if this scandal is big enough to change the hands of political power in the state as well.
So here's what went down. Minnesota uncovered one of the largest welfare fraud schemes in American history. Over $1 billion gone. Just vanished. Taxpayer money, meant for kids and families, reportedly funneled out of the country. And instead of condemning the criminals, Ilhan Omar stepped forward with a straight face and said, "This is a failure of the FBI and the court system." At this point, I'm thinking, really? That's the angle? Then Lara Trump jumped in, and she didn't hold back. I said exactly what millions of Americans were thinking. $1 billion doesn't just walk away. Leadership in Minnesota let this happen. And all eyes immediately turned to Omar and Governor Tim Walz. People are asking, how do you miss a fraud this massive? The White House even said this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. If that shocks you too, go ahead and subscribe so you're always in the loop. Here's where things get even wilder. Treasury officials confirmed that millions ended up in Somalia and into the hands of al-Shabaab terrorists. Instead of demanding accountability, Omar doubled down and claimed that if money reached terrorists, it was simply because federal agencies didn't catch it. That's not leadership, that's deflection. Now, Stephen Miller called this scandal one of the biggest taxpayer ripoffs in history. Omar responded by comparing his remarks to Nazi rhetoric about a man who is Jewish. I literally had to pause for a moment. This is what happens when someone has no argument left. They default to accusations to distract from their own failures, and everyone saw right through it. Minnesotans deserve better. Americans deserve better. There needs to be full transparency, real investigations, and accountability for every dollar lost. This scandal is not going away, no matter how hard certain politicians try to spin it. And trust me, the truth always comes out. Ilhan Omar can blame the FBI, accuse critics of racism, and try every distraction in the book, but at the end of the day, over $1 billion vanished under her watch. People want answers. People deserve answers. And this channel will be right here following every update as the investigation unfolds. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video so more people know the truth.